I've been thinking a lot about music lately, and I think music is so important in different ways. And just recently, I had that brought back to me as my brother, my closest brother to me, had his son pass away about a month ago in a really bad, tragic car accident, and it was really hard for the family. And I haven't had death in my family at all, in extended family or close family, so I'm not really familiar with it. And so, not sure what to do. I went to the funeral in Dallas at my brother's, and we were talking, and I said, what do you need from me? And he said, I want you to lead the music. And I thought, oh dear, that's going to be hard for me. How am I going to stand in front of these people and lead the music? And so I asked him what we were singing, and the opening hymn was Poor Wayfaring Man of Grief, which I thought, that's a hard song on a good day for me to sing, because to me music can be so powerful with emotions. They bring up memories, they bring up many different aspects, and that one always reminds me of the Carthage jail and what went on there. And so anyway, that hymn was very tender to me, and I got through it, and I was doing okay. And they had a song done by a bunch of men, and it was the elders in the church that were singing it, and there was probably about 16 sets or 16 missionaries, and about 15 or 20 elders in the church. And so they were all men, and they got up and sang Elders of Israel. And I had been pretty good about not breaking down, but the words of the song, and I should have looked them up, but it was so amazing. It was uplifting, it was touching, it was sad and happy, and they hadn't practiced. They had just got up there and sang, and I just started to sob. And I looked around, and I swear there was not a dry eye in the place. But then towards the end, I was feeling sad, and that, we'd lost him, and it was, this music was so beautiful, and the men that were singing it were so powerful. And I looked around, and then towards the end of it, I looked around, and they looked like they were sitting a little taller, and they were not maybe feeling quite the grief that we had been. And I remember at the end of it feeling better about, losing him. And he had gone on to another purpose, and that is where he needed to be. Hard for us, but he was rejoicing in the things that he was experiencing. It's kind of like the words were being sung by him almost, and that he was happy and rejoicing. And it wasn't as much of a sad experience after that as it had been. And I just remember thinking, about music and how it touches us. And I thought, why is it that the two instances in my life that I remember music being that powerful have been in association with death? And I was thinking about the other one would have been about 20 years ago, maybe 19 years ago. We lived in a little community in Washington, and my husband was a hospital administrator, and there wasn't a lot of LDS people there, but they knew, the people he worked with knew that he was a Mormon. And it was a Saturday, and we were home doing yard work and whatever, and he got a call from somebody at the hospital, and said that there had been a really bad car accident, and that this person was a member of our church and was asking for a blessing, and could he come down. And he said, sure, I'll be there, and not knowing what he would find. And he called me later and said, you need to come down. And a lady, a young woman, she had 6 little kids. I think the oldest was 8. And she was in a Suburban. She lived in Spokane. She'd been in Seattle visiting her family, and we were kind of in between Spokane and Seattle. So she was going on this road. It was a very straight road, flat, nothing out there. In the afternoon, she fell asleep at the wheel of her car, and it drifted off the side of the road. And the only one point of this whole area that she would have gone, had her been really probably hurt, is the canal. And there was a slight opening in the guardrail, and enough for her car to fit through and go into this giant irrigation canal. And, all the kids were buckled in. None of the electric things would work. She was trying to get her kids out. 3 kids were swept out and drowned. And she was able to get 3 of them out and herself. And I don't think I'd ever seen Kim cry until that moment. He had to go in and tell, that they had passed away. And so we gathered together a lot of clothes and things, people in the area and things. And her husband had not been able to go. He was on a camping trip. And so they found him and came. And anyway, I realized it was somebody I knew from high school. And, before it was horrible and tragic, but I hadn't seen him since high school. I didn't know who he'd married, where he'd moved away from. And then all of a sudden it was this really horrible, tragic thing that had happened. And like I say, I'd never had anybody close to me die. I didn't know her very well, but felt this, connection, and how being a mother of 3 myself, can't imagine going from having 6 children to 3 children in an instant. And, the one thing I admired about her husband is he never blamed her. He came and he took her in his arms, and he, they sobbed, and he asked her if she was okay and how thankful he was that she got the other 3 out. I can't imagine. I think the guilt alone would be really hard. But anyway, they were going to have the funeral in Spokane, and we wanted to go. And I had never been to a funeral before. I think I'd been to a funeral. I guess, no, I had gone one funeral of an older person that I didn't know. And so I was a little bit nervous and apprehensive about going to a funeral. I'd heard lots of stories, there being lots of weeping and wailing and things, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to find, especially it being so hard with children. I think it's hard when children die, and I wasn't sure what to expect. And I was really nervous, and we got to the church, and they had the coffin, and I was surprised they only had one coffin, and they had all 3 of them together in the coffin. I think the oldest one that died was 6, and then he had the little infant in his arms, and the other one was, I think, 3, and she was at the other end. And it was so real, it broke my heart. I just thought, I cannot imagine going through something like this. How are you ever going to be the same after that? And they had some beautiful numbers. The opening hymn was beautiful. The speakers were amazing. They didn't focus on death. It was all very uplifting. And so I remember thinking, this is not bad. This is a beautiful ceremony. And then towards the end, they had a choir sing, and it was primary kids, young women, young men, and adults. And they sang, "I'm a Child of God." But it wasn't the rendition that is familiar. It was a different kind of arrangement, and they had the children sing part of it, and the youth sing part of it, and the adults sang part of it, and then they all sang it together. And there wasn't a dry eye in the place, but the same thing. It was like the sadness was gone, that this was such a, uplifting. This music made everybody feel better. People were just, the countenance seemed to change. I don't know what it was, but the spirit in the whole building changed. I no longer felt, just mortified and horrified, and, how are you ever going to go on, knowing that they were in a good place and that they were happy, and that this music was amazingly soothing, I think, to everybody. And it made, just made me feel like there was hope and brightness when I thought going to a funeral would be dark and dreary and horrible and sad. And, we talked about it with several people afterwards, and they said, I've never been to a nicer, more uplifting, more beautiful ceremony than that funeral. And, I think the talks helped, but it was something about the music of that, those kids singing, the young men, young women singing, the adults singing, the combination of them all, the message, it just, I don't know, it touched your heart like something I couldn't even explain. It was amazing to me. And I think then I realized, and again with my nephew, that music can be such a powerful medium in our lives. It can be something that can be used for bad, but it can surely most definitely be used for good.